Good evening. The November 16th meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission is called to order. This virtual meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act, as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the community rules. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and planning commissioners, while allowing for public participation. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast on Comcast Channel 27 and the city's YouTube channel at youtube.com/Brisbane. The agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org/meetings. All written comments submitted before 2 p.m. of the day of the meeting have already been provided to the Commission and available for public inspection at the front lobby in City Hall and online at brisbaneca.org/meetings. Any writings received after the agenda has been posted, but after 2 p.m. of the day of the meeting, will be available online at the start of the meeting at brisbaneca.org/meetings, at which time the materials will be distributed to the Commission. For those who did not provide written comments, a call-in telephone number was provided on the agenda, which can be viewed online at brisbaneca.org/meetings. The phone number and instructions will also be provided during the meeting. Participants in the Zoom webinar may make their comments through Zoom. Please note that Zoom participants will only be able to address the Commission verbally. I will announce time limits for public comment during the particular item. Staff, may we have a roll call of commissioners, please?
Commissioner Funka?
Here.
Commissioner Gomez?
Here.
Commissioner Gooding?
Here.
Commissioner Patel?
Here.
Commissioner Saison?
Here.
May we have a motion, please, to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Any second?
Second. A second.
Staff, may we have a voice vote, please?
Commissioner Funka?
Aye.
Commissioner Gomez?
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Saison?
Aye.
Right, the agenda is adopted. Are there any members of the public or any commissioners who would like to pull any item from the consent calendar? Staff will post the text and call number on the screen. Any Zoom participants who want to pull an item from the consent calendar, please raise their hand by pressing the raise hand button or by pressing *9 on their phone if they have called in. Staff will be starting a timer for 30 seconds for members of the public to ask to pull any item. While we're waiting for that, are there any commissioners who would like to remove any item from the consent calendar?
No.
We hear none.
15 seconds. No one from the public has raised their hand.
Very good. May I then have a motion, please, to adopt the consent calendar as presented?
I'll make a motion
I
to
make
adopt.
said
Second,
second.
voice vote, please.
Commissioner Funka?
Aye.
Commissioner Gomez?
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding?
Aye.
Commissioner Patel?
Aye.
Commissioner Saison?
Aye.
The motion carries. The consent calendar is adopted as presented. Oral communications. Any oral comments not on the agenda can be called in by calling our teleconference number during the next 1 minute, or to be made by participants in the Zoom webinar. Staff is displaying the call-in number on the screen, and any Zoom meeting participants should raise their hand to indicate to staff they would like to address the Commission on any items not on the agenda. Callers must press *9 to raise their hand, and we'll be starting a timer for 1 minute, please.
15 seconds. No one from the public has raised their hand.
Thank you. All right. Written communications. I'd like to acknowledge we have received some written items regarding matters on the agenda. We received communications in written form from Dana Dilworth and Tom Hines and Barbara Ebel, and those are acknowledged in the record. Staff, are there any other communications received on agenda items that I haven't listed?
You got them all, Commissioner.
Great, thank you. Staff, are there any, there are no callers or Zoom participants who want to make any oral comments, correct?
That's correct. No one raised their hand.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on to new and old business, move on to item, I believe it's C on the agenda. No, pardon me, B on the agenda. No.
Through the chair, we actually do have some hands raised now.
Okay. Regarding,
I guess they have some comment for items not on the agenda.
okay. Who do we have first?
We have Ross Dykes.
Hi there. Apologies. I actually have a comment for something that was on the agenda, but I think I misheard up until just now that part might come later. I was specifically item D about the bus parking.
Yeah, sure. Once we have the presentation from staff, then we'll open it for public hearing and you can, you're perfectly welcome to speak up then, okay?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Any other items not on the agenda?
we have Michelle Salmon.
Go ahead, Michelle.
There we go. Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just sent John Swicky 2 emails with film clips that I took at the Google Bus lot to his email, and I'd like to submit those for the hearing one. And so I wasn't sure how to do that because I just found them. It took me a while to find them. And so I sent them both to the email and I sent one already to the phone number. Okay, John, did you get those?
I did, yes, and I will forward it on to Jeremiah. This is in relation to the bus yard.
Yes, I just
Oh,
wanted to give
okay.
you a heads up. Okay,
I appreciate that.
Thank
Yeah, I'll
you
get it
so
to
much.
Jeremiah. Sure, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
All right, Jeremiah, anybody else on items not on the agenda?
No one else has their hand raised.
Okay, great, thank you. So announcing the new and old business, the first item is for public hearing is 600 Tunnel Avenue interim use permit 2021-UP-3 regarding a commercial mixed use on the Baylands for the Google commuter buses. Staff, is there any additional presentation?
Yes, there is. And I'll do a share screen here quickly. Yes, thank you. This application was continued from the Planning Commission's last meeting on October 28th. This was at the request of the applicant to address issues of dust control, lighting, and bus routing that staff outlined in that agenda report. Since there were members of the public present who wished to speak on the application, the commission opened the public hearing and then continued the item to tonight's meeting. In brief, the application was made by the property owner on behalf of Google for an interim use permit to allow for the continued use of 600 Tunnel Avenue as a staging yard for employee commuter buses. The site's approximately 3 acres in size. It's located on the west side of Tunnel Avenue within the Bayland subarea. The use permit is requested as a renewal of the permit that was granted in 2019. The requested term for this renewal is 5 years. and no site improvements are proposed by the applicant for this renewal. Following the Planning Commission's approval 2 years ago, the yard was graded and surfaced with gravel and enclosed with a chain link fence as was permitted. Entry and exit driveways are located on the north and south ends of the site, and those driveways are paved. 11 solar light standards are also located on the site for use when the drivers are coming and going in the early morning and late afternoon to evening hours. Note that no independent trash service or restrooms are provided on the site, since trash is collected off-site and the buses contain lavatories. Also, vehicle maintenance is not to be conducted on the site. It's prohibited. As I outlined in the October 28th agenda report, soon after operations started, staff received complaints. These were especially focused on lighting and dust, as well as compliance with the Planning Commission's imposed condition on routing buses to the north only and not to the south. During the Planning Commission's last meeting, you also heard from a couple of community members who stated their opposition to the application, raising these same concerns. Conversely, the commission also heard from a couple community members in support of the application. As a reminder, in the October 28th agenda report, staff had suggested a few conditions that would modify the project to address the concerns of lighting, dust, and bus routing. Since that meeting, the applicant has made some modifications to the lighting. They indicated that they've lowered the brightness and the height of the lighting standards. On the matter of the dust, the previously suggested condition of approval that the site be paved, the applicant contends that the recent addition of asphalt grindings to the ground surface is adequate to address this issue. The applicant also has indicated that paving is disruptive and expensive endeavor, especially with that 2 years suggested limitation on the term. Considering that the placement of the asphalt grindings was recently done and the dust issues appear to have been occurring prior to its placement, as indicated in the agenda report, the commission may consider allowing for a continued use without requiring paving. In that case, it's recommended the use permit term be limited to just 1 year. This would allow the project to demonstrate through the dry season that the current surface is adequate to suppress dust generation. On the question of bus routing, the applicant has provided a sample report of their bus routing to demonstrate that they would comply with the condition of approval regarding routing and reporting that routing to the planning director. Also, they have modified their estimated trip count, and that was included in the agenda report for tonight's meeting. It would shorten the daily times of operation, and it would reduce the number of vehicle trips from 180 to 130 in both the mornings and the evenings. Finally, required findings for approval were provided in the agenda report, and the use can meet the findings given the conditions of approval. If the commission sees fit to approve the application without requiring paving and subject to a 1-year term, then the two conditions regarding the paving and the permit term may be modified as was suggested in the agenda report for tonight's meeting. So in closing, staff recommends conditional approval of interim use permit 2021 UP3, the adoption of the resolution with the modifications to the previously provided conditions as suggested. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Yeah, let me find out if any other commissioners have any questions. Commissioner Gomez, any questions of staff regarding this presentation?
No, sir, and not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Funka, any questions of staff?
Maybe, I don't know if this is the right time to ask them. I'm just curious what the burden of the dust and the lights were. What were the original complaints, and how did they impact Brisbane residents? And I'm fine to take that question later, but I'm just curious what the original concerns were.
Right. The concerns were that the buses were generating dust within the yard as they were coming and going. Since operations opened, they actually, initially the driveway portions were not paved, and the applicant had paved those sections, but not the whole yard, to try to help with the dust, especially in that closest section close to Tunnel Avenue. But yeah, it was just that those buses, they're large, and so the gravel was surfaced with, and it included fine materials that generated dust that was not expected when this was first approved. So since then, just more recently, they have added asphalt grindings to address that. On the issue of light, it was that the light was too bright for neighbors on the northeast ridge that look out over the Baylands. And it was not, the complaints were not just isolated to this site, but other sites to the north, but those are not the subject of tonight's hearing. So those were in essence the complaints that were coming.
I see. And the main purpose of the lights, I think you said that they were there for buses returning late at night and leaving early in the morning. But it sounds like they might be on all night, and is the purpose there related to security or?
No, they should be shutting off. I think, as I recall, originally it was by 10 o'clock at night. We shortened that in the conditions to be 9 o'clock, and that was based on what they indicated was their coming and going time. So it was more of a safety issue, as I understand, so that the bus drivers are not having to walk around in the dark to get to their cars or from their cars. And so that was my understanding. So not really a security concern.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Commissioner Patel, any questions of staff?
I just have a couple. When did they make the modifications to the lights?
They've had a few times, as I understand it, that they've indicated that they've modified the lights, kind of going back to the first complaints in 2020, but early 2020, soon after startup. But I think the most noticeable is just between your last meeting on the 28th of October and now, they indicated that they reduced the light brightness by 50% and that they have lowered the standards, I think, by about the same amount. So they're both lower, closer to the ground, as well as brighter. Excuse me, dimmer. Sorry.
And why can't the lights be put on motion detector so that they just turn on when they're needed versus being on, from 6 to 9?
If I may, I'll defer to the applicant to answer that one. I think it may have to do with they'd be coming on and off quite a bit in those hours where people are coming and going, but they might want to answer that.
Okay. Thanks. I have no other questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sayasan, any questions of staff?
Yes. I have a question about their the coming and going of the buses. So in the use permit that we granted, their buses were not to leave in the morning hours past 7 a.m. And in terms of coming back no later than 9 p.m., correct?
That sounds correct. Yeah. It's
so
in your staff report, right?
Okay. And I just wanted to confirm that in their supplemental report that they gave us, 5 buses were leaving between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. every day, and 9 buses were returning from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. every day, correct?
I don't recall the numbers offhand.
Okay, so that's what I'm seeing in the supplemental report.
Mhm.
It
Went
seems because
quiet.
there's no days, or there's no, can you, it seems like I have
can
an
hear you.
internet.
You
issue.
broke out for
Okay.
a few seconds there.
Okay, so my concern is that they were exceeding the hours of operation. And if we were to grant the use permit now, what would happen if they were to do something like that again without informing us that, they're exceeding their hours?
Well, we have conditions of approval, and it's something that if they are going outside what the parameters are for this application, it could be returned back to the Planning Commission for revocation procedures.
And I mean, do we have anything in place? Because what I've read from the report, there's nothing that lays that out. So is that something the Planning Commission needs to decide what happens? I mean, is it after 1 violation, 2 violations? I mean, it's not said in the report. So I'm trying to get an idea.
Well, certainly, if the commission wanted to put some sort of condition in terms of your request that it would be set for revocation after some number of violations were observed or verified, you could certainly do that as part of your conditions of approval.
Okay. Okay, I have no more questions.
Thank you. Why don't we open this for public hearing? And I'm going to first ask if the applicant has any additional comments to make on the application.
I do. May I speak?
Certainly.
Great. Hello, commissioners, members of the public and staff. My name is Eric Aronson. I'm the Director of Asset Management and Sustainability for Baylands Development. I contribute to the lease operations team for the company, as well as the development team working on our plan to build the most sustainable and resilient community possible at the Baylands. My first task when I joined the company involved this lease with Google to park buses at the Baylands. I'm honored to be here before you today to seek a renewal for that use, which was granted by this commission originally in 2019. I'm grateful to this commission as well as the staff for working with us on the continuance to this matter from the previous meeting. Commissioner Patel specifically, who suggested we open the matter up for public comment, which brought forward some important feedback. The commissioners and community members we heard from gave us some very clear action items, which we have been working on since November, as well as previously this summer. The issues necessitating action that we heard were lighting, dusk mitigation, bus routing, as well as schedule. As Ken pointed out, we did reduce the tower heights from 26 feet down to 10 feet. We've reduced the brightness by 50%, as well as angle the lights directly down. We've timed the lights to shut off as the last driver leaves for the night. And as I think it was pointed out, the lighting is really there for driver safety and their security. So that's the lighting. Dust mitigation. Our initial effort to build out this lot was designed around the lowest impact approach, which clearly did not meet the expectations of staff or members of the community. We take responsibility for that. This September, we went ahead and resurfaced the lot with a more compact yet still permeable material that we believe has performed quite well, not only during the dry months initially, but also during the wet storms that we recently had. I also want to acknowledge the dust issue as being relevant to other uses along Tunnel Avenue, some of our tenants as well as our neighbors. And we're working towards a solution on the dust issue in general along Tunnel Avenue. As far as bus routing, we haven't been able to verify by the operator of the bus parking lot or ourselves that buses have been taking the wrong or inappropriate route. We do have signage up, and we've had that up since we first started using the lot, or the lot started to be used. What we have done is we've created a geo-fenced off area on any routes that a bus would possibly take to the south of the parking lot along Tunnel or along Lagoon Avenue. So any violation will be flagged and directly notified to the planning department or the city through an API that we've now arranged for. Lastly, on schedule, the pandemic has caused for a disruption to standard operating procedures for just about all organizations, and Google is definitely no exception. Community members may have noticed that buses were not on site for over a year. And then when they returned, some changes were in order, and we'll acknowledge, and we've actually adjusted the schedule to reflect what we think is the new operating normal for that bus lot over the term of the use permit. We have worked with the tenant and staff to address these changes, and we've updated that schedule, like I said. So sustainability is central to our development planning, and responsible resource management and positive outcomes from an environmental, social, and economic standpoint are important pillars to our identity as a company. We believe the measures we have taken here are ones we can stand behind, but if they are not, we are receptive to other points of view and are willing to make changes. Please consider extending the use permit in the context of these efforts we have taken to rectify the issues. We welcome any additional comments or questions. Thank you, commissioners, thank you, staff, and thank you, members of the public.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any additional items being submitted at this time by the applicant? I think you've already submitted that as part of the revised agenda, correct?
Correct, Commissioner. The staff report includes what we've been sharing over the last few days, so it's up to date with information that we think is important.
Thank you. And I was looking at attachment A5, which is appears to be a log of arrivals and departures by the buses. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
And does that indicate that is this actual logging of what actually transpired, or a schedule?
This is schedule. So this is what we are now proposing. The first and most noticeable change is that the parking of buses is reduced from 90 to 65, and the hours of operation have adjusted slightly later in the evenings and are in general a little tighter in the morning, but always ending before 8 a.m.
And then as far as the evening, the last outbound vehicles is scheduled to end by 9 p.m. Is that right?
Yes. Correct.
And that's when the lights shut off.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Those are my only questions about this. Actually, the lights. Who took the photographs that were submitted to the application that sort of compared the lights from this with the lights from Recology and Golden State Lumber?
Actually, I did. Yeah, I did.
So it was somebody for the applicant, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, what's next? Do we have public comments first or commission questions first?
Through the chair, you did open the public hearing, and we do have two members with their hands raised.
We did. All right, let's go ahead and get questions or comments from the public then. Who's first?
Michelle Salmon.
Great. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thank you for a chance to speak again. I went through, I'm sorry it was very late, but I went through all of my images and I found two videos that I wanted to share. The first one was taken on February 29th, 2020. It was a Saturday, and it shows fugitive dust coming from the Google lot. And although they watered, they were, practicing watering, I observed this truck has to go by first. I had gone past and then pulled over and turned back to take a photo, to take the video. And you can see in the distance the dust. And you're going to have to take my word that it was coming from the dust from the parking lot. You can see how far back to the west the dust originates. So you know that it wasn't coming from Golden State Lumber. But what happened when they were using the water to do the lots on the weekend is the buses are there, so they're not watering under the buses. And so the dust still would come right under. They would, water the roadway, but not under the buses. So I'm really hoping that this new material that's being used mitigates that. And then if it does work, I hope they use it also on Golden State Lumber, because the dust from there has also been egregious. The second video I took on March 13th, 2020. It was a Friday evening, early evening, and it was much more concerning. And the reason why I chased the buses to take the video was I was horrified. I was coming out of Brisbane to go onto Tunnel Road. My light was turning green. One bus whipped from Old Bay Shore heading northbound onto Tunnel without stopping, and the second one followed him after my light had turned green. And I just sat there going, whoa. And then I chased them and followed them, and they turned into the Google bus lot. And if you'd like to show that video, it's pretty clear. Jeremiah, do you have that video queued up?
I can't get it to show on my share screen.
Okay.
It's not showing as one of my windows.
Well,
give me a moment.
Okay. So that was a great concern, because it was my understanding they weren't supposed to be using Old Bay Shore or the bridge or that first part of Tunnel. I didn't know about Lagoon Way, but that was not the first time that I had seen them taking that. It's kind of like a horse going back to the stables at the end of the day, whatever's the fastest way. I am not philosophically opposed to the Google parking lot. I actually think that it's, the whole idea of having this kind of transport is good, but it's obvious that the first go round, the leaser did not follow the directions given by their landlord. And so, Eric, I really appreciate the efforts you have made to mitigate all of the complaints that you have had. And also, I do not think the lighting should be judged based on Golden State Lumber or on Recology. Those are separate issues that, in comparison, they should be judged only on what they themselves are outputting. The other two facilities need serious work, and we need to work with them to also mitigate the amount of light that they're showing. Here's the video. You can see I'm going faster than I would normally go on Tunnel Road. It's a very dangerous road. I want you to notice the concrete bullocks along the side of the road as well, because I have a comment about them. But I hurried so that I could catch up to the Google buses. I really wanted to yell at them because they ran a red light, technically, and they were speeding and didn't stop at the stop sign at when they turned right onto Tunnel Road. But you can clearly see I'm heading northbound. They're heading northbound on Tunnel, and they turn now into the Google parking lot. And that I was under the impression that was disallowed. But it creates a dangerous situation all the way around. I don't know how many of you are aware that I was hit head on by a drunk driver in 1981 at 80 miles an hour on Tunnel Road. And I have the scars to show it, but I was very, very lucky that I was able to literally walk away from it with just 24 stitches to my forehead, 4 broken ribs, 2 dislocated thumbs, and 2 battered up knees, and 1 totaled car. So I'm well aware of how dangerous Tunnel Road is, and it hasn't gotten any safer over the years. And so one of the other things I would like to happen if we continue to have the Google parking lot there is to have those concrete barriers removed. If those concrete barriers had been there when I had my head-on collision, I would be dead, because I went all the way off of my side of the road heading towards Brisbane, all the way off of my side of the road into the dirt to escape that car that hit me head on. That's not an option now, because there are barriers there, and there are barriers northbound. And if you're going to have this increased large-sized traffic on Tunnel Road under the current conditions. Those concrete barriers have to go. I know you've put them up there so that people don't throw garbage or whatever, but a little garbage, is that worth somebody's life who needs that, who might need that space to escape getting hit by a bus or another vehicle that is moving to get out of the way of a bus or passing a bus? It's a very dangerous situation. So it's not just about the lights. It is not just about the dust, and it's not just about the radically increased traffic. It is about safety. And so I would really like that to be addressed. I'd like those concrete blocks removed from Tunnel Road to make it safer for everyone if we're going to continue to have the bus lot. So I hope the mitigation efforts so far have worked. I'm afraid I don't really trust the applicant, not the applicant, I'm sorry, Eric, not you. I don't really trust the Google people to do, the bus drivers to do what they've said. So there needs to be a way to enforce that and make them understand the seriousness of it. And I don't know how you're going to do that. But those are my concerns, and thank you for letting me share my experiences and share my concerns. And I know that you'll make the best decision possible for everyone. And if it's an interim trial period to see whether or not the mitigation efforts work, so be it. But thank you. And Eric, thank you again for the efforts you've made in mitigating the issues. I do really appreciate that. And I hope we can do the same with Golden State Lumber as far as the dust is concerned and the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public, Jeremiah?
Yes, E. Mason, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a little late to the explanations and everything else. I just was going through my emails and received an email that linked it to this meeting. I'm a resident of San Francisco, that we are burdened by the Google buses, but that's our problem that we have. And that's why I'm here, because there's the connection, people that sent me this email regarding this. But one of the elements, I think, for the future consideration is if there would be a mandate for providing an electrical recharge station for the buses. I realize that in 2035, transit buses are supposed to be battery operated. And that's, another, 15 years from now. But would there be consideration in the planning stages now for developing some requirement for battery charging stations? Of course, that would be for the buses that would then be battery operated buses as opposed to the diesel buses that we currently have now. So I offer that as a consideration for medium to long-term planning for your organization. And I thank you for listening to me, being unprepared, but I will go back and read all the documentation that led up to this, and certainly let my neighbors in San Francisco, especially in Noe Valley, know the efforts that are and the impact that the Google buses have on the city of Brisbane. And I'm really sorry to hear that that is a fallout that no one in San Francisco, whether it be the Board of Supervisors, the Transportation Commission, or the MTA, is aware of. That the consequences of what is going on in San Francisco has an impact on the residents of Brisbane. So I thank you very much for indulging my time, your time, being able to have a conversation with you about this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mason, can you give us your full name for the record once more?
Edward Mason.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. All right, staff, do we need to start a timer to cut off any additional public comments, or are we past that?
Well, it's usually 2 to 5 minutes per. We have 2 more. It's your
Oh, 2 more.
discretion.
Okay, sorry, didn't know that. Great.
Okay.
Who's the next?
Next up is Ross Dykes.
Hi there, name is Ross Dykes, resident of Brisbane. I'll keep it brief also because my 3-year-old son's behind me screeching. I personally have some of the same concerns that Michelle does, and just in general, tunnel road can be challenging. But one thing I felt compelled to comment on, because I haven't heard much about it, or about this aspect of it when talking about it, is the environmental impact. Irrespective of the other concerns about the Google buses, which I'm sure if I were a San Francisco resident, I would also share, they do remove a lot of cars from the road. And that has been, of sort of prime concern to people in this area, especially Brisbane, in terms of reducing our CO2 emissions. Vehicles transiting through Brisbane, including the area on 101. Each of those buses takes dozens, potentially dozens of cars off the road, which reduces traffic and CO2 emissions, even if they are running diesel. And if you do convert them to something a bit more environmentally friendly, which is easier to do one bus versus, dozens of cars, that makes even a greater impact. So, that's kind of my thought, is it's kind of a necessary evil, right? The buses have to go somewhere. They've got to be somewhere near the freeway. And not having these buses would potentially be even worse. So that's kind of my thought.
Great, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Jeremiah, who's next?
Mary Rogers.
Hi, Mary.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my comments. I initially opposed this project on Tunnel Avenue, primarily for the same reasons Michelle spoke to, in particular the boulders on Tunnel and the buses. It's very congested and there's tons of safety issues there. There's not enough room to pull over. There's not enough room for folks who ride their bikes to work. It's just overall an unsafe road. And to have 65 to 90 buses on it makes it even worse. Back when this permit was issued, I was at that meeting where the applicant asked for 5 years and it was reduced to 2 years. At that point in time, they agreed to eco lighting. They agreed to providing data on the buses and the routes that they were taking, and they have not been able to correct that, with the exception of the lighting. And that only happened in the last couple of months. So the confidence that I have in the applicant and the landlord is very low, because it wasn't until people started complaining that they got up, or it wasn't until they were at risk of not getting their lease renewed that they started making those corrections. So my confidence level is very low. Google is one of the leading AI companies in the world. And for them not to have that data for us is not a good sign. And I just don't think they're going to be able to come up with it. So I do hope that the commissioners, you take this seriously and at least, renew it, but renew it for 6 months. Get everything completed and then take a look at it. But it's not going to change the lack of safety on Tunnel Road. I mean, I agree with Michelle that those boulders need to be removed to provide some type of area where people can just, if someone's going to get hit or something, they have a space to pull over. There's no place to pull over on that road. And I feel for the San Francisco residents as well, because I took the train and going down that road, it gets congested. And for those buses to be on Tunnel makes it even worse. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for listening.
All right. Jeremiah, anybody else?
Yes, we have Randall. Please state your full name for the record.
Yes, my name is Randall Venerable. I'm a resident of Brisbane. And actually, I'm just coming into this meeting and kind of listening to everybody to get an idea of what the concerns are. And I respect everybody's opinion on this. What I am seeing is this is a larger problem that has a lot to do with the fact that the buses actually do provide a service, and they do reduce cars by about 50 cars or 50 people off the road. So there's an advantage there. Also, as far as environmentally, it does help the environment because there's less CO2, as the other gentleman spoke to. But some of the other issues that I see that in Brisbane, it concern me. And lighting is important, I think, because we have an issue with homelessness in Brisbane. It's like everywhere else in the country, in San Francisco and elsewhere. And I think you have to have lighting for security purposes, for the not only for the people who are getting in and out of their cars to do their job. They're people that are there to earn a living, and they're trying to help by earning a living after, especially during COVID. And one of the things that was mentioned, the site was pretty much dark, like everything else was in San Francisco and the world, for about a year. So I think by renewing this for a year or even longer gives them an opportunity to do some planning, to figure out how best to make this work. So that's just my comment. As residents, I definitely want to see things improve here, and everybody's safety is important. So lighting and CO2 emissions, all those things are important to our community. So that's all I had to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Try to remind anybody else in the queue?
Yes. Roland, please state your full name for the record.
Hi, this is Roland Lebrun, Lebrun. I live in South San Jose. I'd like to echo Edward Mason's comments. As all of you have recognized, we need these buses. They will actually improve the environment, but they are spending an awful lot of time idling wherever they are. They have got to keep the engines running. And the problem is that they are diesels and they're generating pollution. That needs to be addressed. The first thing we have to do is to identify where these buses need to be. There's obviously going a whole bunch of them around Google, and there's another 90 of them around Google in Sunnyvale, Mountain View, sitting around, idling and running their diesels. They have to, so that the driver, has got air conditioning, etc. So we know about that. But then the question is, where else do they need to go? Do they need to go in Brisbane, which is what's currently in front of you tonight? Or could they be going somewhere in San Francisco? In San Francisco, an obvious location would be near Pier 70, specifically in the area around Cargo Way. I hope that you know where that is. That would be a good location. This is a location you should be discussing with San Francisco. But whatever the ultimate location is, at the end of the day, we'll need to have an electrical charging infrastructure. And that is what we all have to work on together. And as you know, I'm in the South Bay. I'm very interested in this as much as you are. And I'm also concerned that very often Brisbane and the Baylands in particular is some kind of dumping ground for San Francisco. That needs to be addressed. We need to come up with equitable solutions that work all of us as neighbors, whether you're in San Mateo County or you're in San Francisco. That's where we need to be headed. And that's my 2 cents for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jeremiah, anybody else?
There's no one else.
Okay. See, do we need to start any timers to end that, or are we ready to close the public hearing?
I actually did not put up the slide, so maybe we should do about a minute with the slide up.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll start a slide for a deadline for any further public comments. Just to be efficient here, perhaps we could go ahead and start the round robin on commissioners making any comments or any additional questions. Commissioner Funka, any further comments?
No comments at this time. Thanks.
Commissioner Gomez.
Nope. No further comments. Thank you.
Sandip.
I have a question of the applicant. Where is the GPS data on the buses?
So yeah, in the packet that staff provided, it was the previous attachment to the schedule.
It was in the last packet. Sorry, I was looking at this one.
Yes, the most recent packet. You can see what that data looks like. It shows when buses, or when the time buses enter the geofenced area, the amount of time they're in the geofenced area, and then when they leave. And it was tested recently. So if anyone saw a bus on Lagoon Ave, it was purely a test.
Oh, but it doesn't give you data on the actual location of the bus, whether it's going southbound or northbound.
What it does do is it gives you the geofenced area, or from that stop sign on Tunnel Avenue, you would either make a left. If you were leaving the driving south on Tunnel, you would either make a left to go across Lagoon, or you'd go across the bridge. So no matter which direction you travel through those two areas, the bridge section of Tunnel or Lagoon Ave, you're in that geofenced area, and that's where the GPS does send, the data is collected if they're in that area.
Okay, and how come the lights weren't changed based on previous complaints?
So it was, I guess, a phased approach. We were attempting to keep the lights as close to what they were originally as possible. And so we didn't, I think, do enough in the beginning. We didn't lower the boom or the mast heights. We did angle them down, but the way the lights work, they still bled out. And, after doing a few site visits at night, we realized, half the lights can be turned off and or dimmed to about 50% to achieve effectively the same level of security for drivers.
And why do they have to be on the whole time? Why can't they be on a motion detector when they're just on when they're needed?
We never really contemplated, motion detection. I'd have to go back to the third-party vendor who's providing those lights and see if that's even an option. I think the lights turning on and off might be more disruptive to some people than just having them on at a lower level and less of them. But we can look into it if that's the decision.
Why don't we go back to the procedure then? Jeremiah, our timer has run. I take it. Any other public comments?
That's correct. Timer has run and there are no other raised hands.
Thank you. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing.
In a second.
I'll
Second.
Voice vote, please.
Commissioner Funke,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding,
Aye.
Commissioner, missing my commissioners, Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Public hearing is closed. And I want to thank all the folks who called in for their comments. They're appreciated and considered. Thank you. So let's continue our deliberations period. Sandip, do you have any other comments or?
No, not right now. Thanks.
Napalo, any deliberations or comments?
I think the community members that have spoken have brought up some good concerns. I think we discussed some of those in the year prior when we first looked at this. I am interested in some sort of GPS data visualization on what's going on. Generally, though, I think the buses are serving a greater community benefit by reducing both CO2 loading related to excessive traffic and getting cars off the road. So I'm just repeating what others have said at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Rule, I've forgotten whether I stopped at you or not. Did you have any deliberations or comments to make?
The most, I thought that Commissioner Sayason's comment about potential consequences was important. What happens if the agreements or the conditions are violated? Are there any consequences? I think it's just an important thing to consider. But it sounds to me like the city has thought about that, with potential of making this a shorter extension period. See how it goes. Like maybe make it more of a sort of just a shorter conditional or provisional approval, just to make sure. And then, of course, we have to depend on the data. And it sounds to me like we are depending on self-reporting here, which I know doesn't always work in all areas of life, but right, because I think that the buses provide their own data on whether or not they're obeying the conditions. But anyway, in general, I'm in favor of it, and I think the consequences issue that Commissioner Sassen raised is important. But other than that, I have no other comments.
Thank you very much. Amala, did you have any further deliberations?
Yes. So before the consequence issue, I'd like to address with Ken. So back to the GPS and the data. Am I correct that the only data we have is this general log that we were given on October 28th via email by Ross Benson from Google? Is that the data we're talking about?
Right. This was essentially, I took it as a sample report. They have not provided, over the course of their operation, they have not provided past data to me or any of the staff on their motions. So I see this as something that they're recognizing, that this condition of approval that we've added now for the monthly reporting of data, that they're trying to demonstrate that they are willing and able to do it. But in terms of past data, no, I don't have anything from
Okay,
them.
so when they're going to give us a monthly report, will that be specific? Because the only data that we've had so far is like a general log of just Monday through Friday with no dates, with no times of actual bus movement. Like, will the monthly reports actually be very specific to dates and time?
So I'd go back to the condition of approval as I recall, and I could pull it up here if that helps, but it was essentially that they need to have these GPS tracked, and they need to provide us with data on their violations. And I think if we want to tighten that up and be more specific about that, it's essentially maybe it's a daily log of every bus and what they have done.
Because I think we also want to know
reasonable thing.
We also want to know that they're not caravanning their buses, like they're spreading out. Because I remember when we approved it back in 2019, I was seeing from some of the residents comments from the residents on our community Facebook that people complaining about the light pollution, the dust. And the one comment that struck out at me the most, and that's why I emailed you about it, and you said you forwarded it to Google, was the concern about, a resident said he was driving to work around 7 a.m. and that he saw that the Google buses were causing such a backlog on tunnel because they were, I guess, caravanning and driving slowly, that drivers were frustrated, and in their frustration were trying to go around the Google buses, causing potential accidents. So that was my concern. And that's why I was asking them, are you sticking to schedule? If you're supposed to not, leave after 7 a.m., are you sticking to that? Because if they're going later and they're going during a time where there's heavy traffic, that's going to really create, I think, a more dangerous situation on Tunnel if there are more cars there, and if the buses are caravanning one after another and slowing down or whatnot, and people get frustrated. You know, you never know, they're late for work too or whatever, and they're going to do things that may not be very safe. So that's my concern about wanting very specific data so that we're monitoring what's going on.
I hear you. If you want to add more specifics to that condition, it's, you know, the commission may do so if, but staff has heard you, and we can essentially, I think, you know, they have the capability to provide us more, and we can demand that of them as, you know, part of that condition, compliance with that condition. So
Ken, how would you word that? How would you word that as part of this, as part of the conditions?
I think I would go back to just what I mentioned and add a statement that it's a, you know, it's a monthly report to include daily logs of each bus's movements in and out of the facility.
Well, let me sort of try to recap what I think our consensus, or at least, you know, majority trending here is that I think that we're reasonably satisfied that the new asphalt grinding stuff is going to help, and we can sort of monitor that and see how it works. Just as my personal aside, not my reading of the room, is that all the video I've seen and my personal observation is that there's some dust, and it tends to blow from prevailing winds away from Brisbane residents and not toward them. That's, you know, dust is dust, it's going somewhere. The lighting, I think the recent changes they made are a distinct improvement. You know, if the complaints were at some point from the Northeast Ridge, I can vouch for the fact that this lot doesn't appear to be a real significant incremental amount of light compared to the existing very heavy industrial uses. But that's more my personal observation. But I think the lighting, they made significant improvements in how high and how strong and the timing of them. So I suspect the room feels that that's not a major impediment to ongoing, you know, permitting. What I sense is that it's about traffic and safety. I'd like to ask the applicant, Eric, are you still here? I think you are, right? Yeah, there you are. Is it feasible for your monthly reporting to essentially fess up as to whether any buses are going south on Tunnel instead of north, period?
I believe so. I would have to talk to the tenant, but I believe it's realistic to do. Same concept on the areas to the south. We would just implement the areas to the north, which would capture every bus as it moves through that area.
That seems to be the bottom line is let's make sure they're going north, and also let's make sure that they've stopped going or exiting the lot after 7 a.m. I guess it is. Would seem to me in today's era of not just big data, but mega data, that would not be a technical impediment. So that's my sense of what the room would like to see happen. While we're talking about safety, what was the reason for those concrete bollocks or whatever they are?
Dumping.
Sorry?
May I speak?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm Sam, actually the property manager for Bay Lanes. So we received that complaint, which I do respect that, from Michelle Solomon. It was back in 2019. And the main reason we put them there was that it was a heavy, constant illegal dumping. And we did remove them, and illegal dumping was just happened right after that. And then we received some comments from the Public Works Department reasoning behind removing them, so we have to put them back. But the minutes we remove them, it creates a major illegal dumping. and even with those concrete blocks there, we're still seeing illegal dumping, and we constantly clean it. It's just nonstop. And also, I want to make also comments about the scheduling. I think Google are willing to either provide a monthly report with the buses that may be going south on tunnel as option one, or option two, they will help the city create an API, which the city will have immediate, constant access to this data. And I will talk to Google also about the potentially submitting also a monthly report with the actual buses schedule to make sure they comply with the new schedule we submitted recently.
What is the acronym you mentioned? What is an API?
It's an API, so it's just a direct feed for the city to keep a daily, like where the daily log would go. We would present a report monthly. If there's daily exchange of data, it may be better accommodated through an API, but we can talk with John and Ken and other folks at the city about setting that up. It would be preferred for us, but no difference either way.
So instead of having a monthly report coming to you, to the public or public planning department, so they will have access to it constantly.
This is quickly getting beyond my personal pay grade, but I don't think I need to micromanage that one. Any other commissioners' comments before I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
For
Chairperson Gooding, may I?
Sure.
Okay. So I didn't come in with a heavier comment earlier, but I mean, the reality is Google employs some of the best data scientists, and I was looking at my notes from that meeting. Commissioner Saizon mentioned a couple things that brought that back into memory. We had representation from Google at that meeting in person. They committed to a lot of transparency with data. They could very quickly, and I know we don't have their representation on it, but they could very quickly put together a community dashboard. Forget staff having to be burdened with data analysis. Like, this should be presented very cleanly, very easy to understand, in real time. Movement of vehicles, what's happening, who's infracting, when it's happening, all of that could be in a very clean dashboard. And I know that Google can build that relatively quickly. So the question is, how do we put that parameters around the approval, if we are pursuing approving this, how do we put that in the into the conditions? That I don't know, but I want to share because there's no reason why we shouldn't request that level of transparency.
Oh, I have to point out that we have by any objective standard, a much broader, larger agenda item still remaining. So I'd like to try to get some closure on this. I think, are we generally have a mind that the next term should be short enough that we can really keep our finger on the pulse of this? That'd be a year instead of 2 years.
I think we should keep it the lowest amount of time that we can get data. And I think that we should make a motion to, I'm not making the motion, I'm just throwing it out there, that the applicant must provide daily movement of each bus that uses that lot as part of the conditions.
So my suggestion, to just have a workable motion that we can articulate, is that we propose a condition that the applicant, and of course the applicant has to look to its tenant for this, but the burden's on the applicant, it's their property, be able to provide reliable movement data to the satisfaction of staff. Because I don't think we can toolsmith this tonight, or wordsmith this tonight to be exactly what we need and they can do. I don't think we can. But we need movement data to the satisfaction of staff that meets the the restrictions in the permit. And that if staff is not satisfied with that, what they're getting, that they bring it to the attention of the commission, and we take actions that as appropriate to consider revocation of the permit. Is that workable, John?
Yes, I understand your intent, and I think that's reasonable. I mean, it would take, I think the only thing you might want to do is, are we be looking at a window of time? Is going to take them, give them up to 30 days to do this, or
Yeah,
you know, that would be the only thing I'd want if we don't have it tomorrow or the day after the permit takes effect. I'd want to give them some slight window of time to work out what that data set is, and whether it's real time or whether it's some hybrid at the beginning or whatever. So I would think maybe 30 days from when the effective date of the permit for them to start having something in terms of approved by the city as to how they're going to produce this data, and go from there.
that seems okay to me. Anybody else have any ifs, ands, or buts about that piece?
Oh, that makes sense to me. And then if I understand your suggestion, Commissioner Gooding, is basically that we don't put any exact provisions around it. We just first ask to produce the data, and then we revisit at a future date. We look at the data and then decide if there will be any consequences or ramifications.
Well, and I wonder, since I think we've heard from the public that I think there are legitimate and reasonable safety concerns here. Is there a way, John, to carve into this some automatic, or just put in there that this commission will review this issue X date from now, so the staff can present to us what they've gotten and what the data looks like? Would that be feasible?
Yeah, I think if you want to, I guess let's work backward from if you're going to give them a year term, do you want to report back in 90 days, 180 days, 120 days? I think that's perfectly reasonable to see what the data is telling us, what the form of the data is. If there's concerns that the data set is inadequate, that gives you an opportunity to have collected it and reviewed it. So I would say either 90 or 120 days following its effective date, report back. And assuming you want to give a year term, that seems reasonable to me.
I'm confused. If they're going to provide the data, let's say we tell them within 30 days, provide us the data of the bus movements during that time. And if they do it, and let's say the data shows multiple movement violations, what do we do? I mean, don't we act right away if the data shows that, instead of waiting, 90 days or whatever?
Yeah, I guess I'm presuming the data will show they're complying with the conditions. Obviously, if they have a pattern and practice of violating the conditions of approval, then that would be terms and grounds for revocation, and we would bring that forward as an item for the commission's consideration to initiate that proceeding. But I guess I'm presuming the data will suggest that they're intending and will adhere to the conditions of approval. But you're right, I shouldn't take that as a article of faith. And if the data suggests the result is something different, there's a different path forward, which is a revocation path forward.
And another issue, so what if the new materials that they're putting down on the ground and the dust issue continues and we get all these complaints from the residents? Will that also initiate, come back to us to address that issue as well, or?
Well, again, if there's this issue of sustained complaints, right? So, there's still going to be a condition about no nuisance dust, or no, I believe, there'll still be a condition in there that says it can't be generating fugitive dust that travels off-site, or whatever the condition is. So, again, the normal course of events would be to work with the applicant to see if they can cure that. If they can't cure that, then again, that's another grounds for revocation. The other idea is that's why it's also such a short-term permit, again, so that we don't, everyone's at ease that it's not going to sit there for 3 years. The very worst case is it's a year, and we'll go from there. But again, if they violate the operational condition of not generating fugitive dust, then then they are in violation, and either cure it or we're back to the commission, and then they'd make their case to you that, well, maybe they have some other alternative or whatever, or their permit could be revoked.
Okay, and one final thing I don't think we resolved, did we, about what Michelle said about the concrete bollards, and, you know, that she felt that if we were going to approve this permit that they should be removed for safety reasons. So did we decide on that?
I would just point out that again, the city engineer has reviewed this application and he had no particular requirement. The bollards, you know, there's a safety component, there's a nuisance of trash abatement. That was sort of an agreement between the city and the property owner some time ago outside the scope of this particular project. And I would suggest if somebody's concerned that those bollards are the harm of them outweighs the good, that's a separate conversation for the city council to have. And that's probably the way to address that, because it was a bigger issue. It was never tied to this permit originally. And again, given that, and presuming the data suggests or proves that they're not going southbound illegally, there'd be no nexus to require anything south of this entrance to be modified, right? Because there's not traffic being generated by this facility that would generate the need to remove those. So I think it's a separate discussion for the council, and that would be my suggestion for community residents.
Sorry, can you explain to them what they need to do? If it's like, if they want to go to the council, like how do they talk to the council about this? Because it seems like there's multiple people.
Sure. Yeah, again, the first thing is there's like your hearings, there's an item or opportunity for citizens to address items that aren't on the agenda. So that would be if someone wanted to pose that as an issue, they could make that comment to the city council. The city council can then refer it to staff. And then there's a process of addressing it in that fashion and manner.
All righty, I think we have some consensus around a possible motion to make, which I think would be, if I can try to restate it and move, that the period be for a term of one, permit be for a term of 1 year, that the conditions proposed by staff remain in place. I think we want to have this come back to the commission sort of automatically within a 90-day period to see what the level of compliance has been. Just so we have it before us again. That way, it's not entirely the burden of staff to decide, how grave the complaints are and do they warrant coming back to us or not. We'll just see it again in 90 days and be able to assure the public that we're looking at it and have checked. Any other major points I missed?
Well, you're going to add the condition of the GPS that the staff is they're going to provide the GPS, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So to recap, we have the 1 year term. We'll have the data in terms of reliable movement data to the satisfaction of staff. And that's to be provided within 30 days, I think I heard as a suggestion of the effective date. The condition number 1, which had to do with paving, would be taken away and replaced with the condition that I suggested in the body of the staff report, which read, the yard's ground surface shall be maintained to prevent airborne dust generation.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And then reporting back to the commission in 90 days. From
so
the
is that
day of the...
Is that a condition or just something that staff will do as an item initiated by the commission as an informational item?
It'll be a condition of approval, but it's not going to be a public hearing. We would present it back informationally to but we should capture it in the conditions of approval.
Will do. Okay.
All righty.
Well, I'm looking at attached Exhibit A. Is Exhibit A what we are conditions of approval are? Is that what we're approving?
As modified is being discussed, yes.
So we're not taking anything off of the condition. We're not taking anything off of Exhibit A. We're just adding those things that we added.
Well, Exhibit A has condition 1, which would be removed and replaced with the shorter condition that just prohibits dust generation. Because
As a
this
reminder,
condition 1 has to do with paving, which I understand you're not requiring. And then condition 18 would be modified to be 1 year instead of 2. And then we're sorry, I'm jumping around here. Condition 4 would be modified as we discussed in terms of the routing data. And we will add that condition having to do with reporting back to the commission after 90 days.
All righty. Anybody want to say so moved?
Don't you have to repeat the whole motion first, Commissioner?
Oh, please. Oh, please.
Also move.
All right. Any seconds?
A second.
Voice vote, please, staff.
Commissioner Gooding,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Funka,
Aye.
Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sayasan,
Aye.
So we're being liberal with the alphabet tonight. All right, the motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The next staff report, please, on agenda.
Through the chair,
item-
I think you
Yes.
should read the appeals.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I always forget the appeal. Anyone may appeal the action of the Planning Commission to the City Council, except where specified otherwise. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk not later than 15 calendar days following the Planning Commission's decision. Exceptions to the 15-day filing period include the following. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk within 6 calendar days of the Planning Commission's action for use permits and variances, and 10 calendar days for tentative maps and advertising sign applications. An application form and fee is required to make a formal appeal. For additional information, please contact the city clerk at 415-508-2110. Thank you, Jeremiah. We have a staff report on agenda item D, please. Is it D or C? The second one.
C.
Can everyone hear me okay? Can you see my presentation? Okay, great. I'm Kelly Beggs, contract planner for the city of Brisbane, and we are here before you. This item was continued from the October 28th public hearing. And we have Aaron Ackman, who's principal at Good City Company, as well as Nick Hamilton, who's a senior planner at Good City Company, for the consultants on this effort. And Aaron will be kicking off this presentation tonight.
Thank you, Kelly, and good evening, Honorable Chair and Planning Commission. Good to see you again. If we could go to the next slide. So tonight, here's the presentation overview. I won't go into detail, but we won't have as detailed a presentation as we had last meeting, as a lot of the contents is also in the written report, but we'll try to provide an overview, answer some questions that came up in discussion that came up during the last Planning Commission, and of course, answer any questions that the Planning Commission or public may have. Next slide. So, of course, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to have the Planning Commission review new objective design and development standards for the city of Brisbane. And we'll get more into this during the presentation, but I think a good question that was brought up at the last meeting is what exactly is the state requiring that the city do and that cities do across California? As the Planning Commission may recall, we're primarily here because of several state laws that have gone into effect or have been strengthened over the last 4 years. One is SB 35 and another is the Housing Accountability Act. And in sum, what they do is say that cities can no longer apply subjective standards to housing developments. So subjective standards are found throughout almost every city in California, including Brisbane. And usually what a city would do, including Brisbane, is this development will go through an entitlement process, and you'll get to the end of that entitlement process, whether it be at the Planning Commission or the City Council, and you'll have to make certain findings. In Brisbane, the findings say proposal scale, form, and proportion are harmonious, and then materials and colors must complement the project. Another finding says that the project must integrate well and may maintain a compatible relationship. The state now says cities can no longer apply these subjective standards. So these standards are no longer, these findings can no longer be applied. So they're essentially not part of your code anymore. They're not part of any code within the state of California. What you can do is apply objective standards. So currently, the city of Brisbane, the objective standards that the city has are lot dimensions, lot coverage, height, setbacks, storefront requirements, and open space requirements. As it stands today, those are the only standards that the city of Brisbane can apply on new housing developments. What we're proposing tonight is that the city increase the amount of discretion that you have by adopting new objective standards. And we'll get into what those new objective standards are. As part of this process, we're not removing any standards, we're adding new standards. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this process is almost a year in the making. There was a kickoff in January of 2021. This is the third time that we're going to the Planning Commission. The first time was an overview back in February. Of course, we went back to the Planning Commission for the first round and review of these objective design standards in October. We've also gone to the City Council and had a combination of virtual outreach meetings, surveys, as well as one in-person community event at a farmer's market in Brisbane. Next slide, please. This is a summary. We've had, as I mentioned, quite a bit of outreach. We've had 2 surveys with a total of a little over 230 results. We also had a farmer's market and library pop-up where we were able to connect one-on-one with many residents, both inform about why we're doing this process, as well as receive feedback about what type of objective standards would you like to see in the code. And here is a list, but there were a lot of common themes that we heard both in the surveys, community events, at the council meeting, at the Planning Commission meeting, and of course in the in-person meeting. Folks like to see articulation of facade and roof lines, active ground floor, and a mix of uses and areas, large storefront windows, usable outdoor space, upper level setbacks, as well as individual entries and equipment screening. Now, why this list is important, these objective standards are currently not found within Brisbane's code. So objective standards like this could not be applied to developments if they were proposed and in front of you as the Planning Commission today. Next slide. So at this point, I think I'll turn it back to Kelly and she'll take the presentation the rest of the way.
Thank you, Aaron. So I'm going to start by summarizing the October 28th Planning Commission hearing. The hearing focused on the ordinance scope, state law requirements, where you would see housing development projects in Brisbane, and guest parking requirements and narrow lot parking considerations. I'll go into each of these topics on the following slides. So to start with the draft ordinance scope, I want to start by recapping that. What the draft ordinance is doing is it's establishing those objective standards that Aaron was describing for housing development projects. It's establishing a new procedure that applies to those projects, allowing by right multiple family dwellings in the SCRO 1 and NCRO 2 districts, and establishing a residential density requirement for the NCRO 2 district. As Aaron noted in the beginning of the presentation, this ordinance is adding regulations that govern building design, including second and third story step backs, articulation requirements, ground floor requirements, and parking design requirements. The ordinance is not increasing height or intensity regulations or decreasing step backs or setbacks or allowing any new uses that are not previously conditionally permitted. So the purpose here is really to add regulations to allow the city to objectively evaluate the design of new multiple family housing projects. The next item that I wanted to discuss and was a central theme of the October 28th hearing is what is required by state law versus what is more optional in this ordinance. And the state is not requiring that the city object to objective standards, but it is saying that you can't apply the current subjective standards that you have to housing development projects. So the city's design permit findings, which were described earlier in this presentation and shown here in the second bullet point, are subjective, and these could not be applied to a housing development project. And just to clarify what a housing development project is, it's a residential project with 2 or more units, and these projects can be residential only, or they can also include mixed use, provided that at least 2/3 of that floor area is designated for residential use. So state law is requiring that these standards are applied to this type of project, that they have to be objective, but it's not dictating exactly what the standard is. For example, the state is not specifying exactly how deep a setback or a step back has to be. It's just simply saying that it has to be stated objectively. So I'm going to reuse these illustrations that we showed in the last meeting. So this slide is showing you the objective standards that currently exist in the NCR2 districts. It shows the 35-foot height limit and the 10-foot rear setback. And what objective standards do to this is that they're going to chisel away at this block with clear and quantifiable standards that encourage high quality design. So those include, we could start with the step back standards at upper levels that decrease the massing from both the front and the rear. Then adding articulation, open space, and ground floor height requirements, as well as a requirement that all of those entrances to the building are publicly visible. Then adding window trim and transparency requirements to add some further detail onto the building. So this is what we start with the current objective standards, and then this is an iteration of how those objective standards chisel away at the massing to give you a better design while complying with state law. Another topic of discussion from the Planning Commission hearing was what districts we would see housing development projects in. So those are circled here on this slide. The NCR2 district is here, and this district does require a storefront use at the ground floor, but permits dwelling units above. The R3 district permits triplexes, duplexes, does not permit commercial uses. So this we would see more of a solely residential project. And then the SCR01 district, you could see mixed use or solely residential projects here. So moving into an example of a housing development project that was recently approved. This slide shows an illustration of 213 Visitation Avenue, which is a recent approval from late in 2020. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is to show you what the residential density requirement would look like. We did base that requirement off of looking at past approvals. So as you can see, the residential density for this lot, which is slightly larger, would be 677 square feet of lot area per unit. And we're moving forward with a recommendation for 600 square feet of lot area per unit. What you can see here in the bottom right corner of this slide is the ground floor plan for this. And I'm putting this here just to show you that for these narrow lots, the amount of units is really going to be controlled from the parking requirement because they can only park so many units. This project and another both had to do mechanical stackers with 4 spaces at the rear, and they do have to have a turnaround to get out with a frontward facing vehicle. So that dovetails into the last topic that I wanted to cover tonight, which is the parking requirements. So staff understood that the Planning Commission did not support a guest parking requirement reduction, but tonight we are hoping to clarify if the Commission would recommend retaining the existing guest parking requirement as is at 1 space per 5 units, or if the Commission recommends proceeding with a smaller reduction. And then lastly, given the broader discussion of parking, staff believes that the commission will likely recommend proceeding with a reduction in required storefront area for narrow lots in the NCR02 district rather than a parking exemption, which is what is shown kind of in this. The first sentence is the parking exemption. The second is that reduction in storefront use in the NCR district that we talked about last time. But we did just want to get clarity on that recommendation. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. As the commission is aware, we did receive 4 written public comments. I believe that we have covered a lot of the content of those comments in the presentation, but we're happy to answer more questions from both public, obviously, and from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go around the horn for commissioners and see if they have any additional questions of staff or the contractors regarding this. Commissioner Funka, any questions?
Just one, can you please clarify again what the trade-off is around parking? So lots that are below 30 feet are exempt from off-street parking?
Yes, sorry, I did breeze through that a little quickly. Let me head back to this slide and share my screen again. One moment. All right, so the commission may recall, can you see my screen now, I'm hoping, that in the NCR2 district, and I'll actually go up a slide because you can really see it here, that the ground floor is greatly limited in its ability to provide that required storefront use. And it is required at 600 feet unless the approving body dictates that a smaller amount is allowed. But with the requirement to have parking in these narrow lots, you lose basically half of the frontage of the lot. So there's a real trade-off here between meeting the required parking by allowing the driveway or providing the full 600 square feet. I think that this one had like a 290 square foot commercial component at the front. So what staff is asking for here with the kind of this either or option is that the commission recommends an approach for these narrow lots that we are seeing a pattern that they cannot meet the 600 square foot requirement. So the options here would be to either require them to supply the full 600 square feet of storefront use, provided that it's not a corner lot where the cars could enter from the side street, or to decrease that minimum storefront use for lots that are narrower than 30 feet wide. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that makes sense. So it's basically if the lot's narrow, then you are absolved of having to provide the off-street parking. As I understand it. Yeah, or the other condition.
Right, it's an either or. So you would either be absolved of having to provide the parking, or you would have a reduced storefront requirement that you could actually meet while providing your parking.
Oh, see. Okay, I understand. Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez, Napalo? Any questions of staff?
Not at this moment. No, thank you.
Commissioner Patel?
No, no, I don't have any questions right now.
Commissioner Syosat?
No questions.
I have just one question. This is separate and distinct from the issue of whether we change the amount of guest parking that's required from 1 for every 5 units to 1 to every 10 units. Right? That's a different decision point.
What we just went over, yes, is a different decision point. So 2 decision points with parking. One is what the commission's recommendation is for the guest parking, which is again separate from the recommendation of the trade-off between the storefront use and the required parking.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. All right, shall we open the public hearing then? There's no applicant for this in particular. Are there any members of the public that have lined up to speak on this, Jeremiah?
Yes, we have Michelle Salmon, and I'm going to put up the slide with the number on it as well.
Yes, thank you.
One moment. Go ahead, Michelle, introduce yourself.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. And by the way, Michelle is spelled with one L. So if you'd like to correct the minutes, I'd appreciate it. I have a question. I didn't understand exactly what you meant between the 667 square feet lot area per unit versus the 600 square foot lot area per unit. Are you reducing the requirements for how many units can fit on a lot? That's a question. Can you answer that, Planner Beggs?
Through the chair, if you can just make your comments and we'll respond if that's the chair's preference, or the chair wants to handle it.
I just wanted to understand that. And then also, I recommend that we really lean towards smaller retail space and retaining the parking, off-street parking for the number of units, because we have a serious parking issue in downtown Brisbane. And you can always, later on for conditions of approval, you can, give a variance if you feel that it's really warranted, and do the opposite. But even now already, there's a whole issue of double parking on Visitation Avenue to run in and get your boba tea or your Mexican food or your library book. And it's creating a really dangerous situation in downtown Brisbane during the daytime hours and even during the evening hours. So I really recommend that we stand firm on the amount of parking needed. Brisbane is not like other places, and it's a very challenging place to park. And we built a brand new library without any public parking, and we still have the old facility without any public parking. And I think that's an issue that we really don't want to open the door for having more issues with parking because of new buildings being built on in these areas where they can. And there are a lot of 25-foot lots, thanks to one developer who has split up properties. So that would be appreciated. And I really would like to better understand why the density went from 667 square feet lot per unit down to 600 square feet lots per unit. Thank you.
Yeah.
I may have more questions later.
Do you want us to, would you like us to respond?
Yeah, please.
Chair?
I'm happy to respond. So just to clarify, in the NCR02 district right now, there is no residential density standard. The residential density standard is set by the conditional use permit. But since these projects are going to be allowed by right, we do need to set something forth. So the reason that we showed that slide with the recent past approval was to show you something comparable to the residential density that we're proposing. And we are expecting that on those 25 by 100-foot lots, that would yield a 4-unit project. And as I mentioned, it's also controlled by the parking requirement. So I do believe that it's consistent with past approvals.
So can you just clarify what the residential?
Yeah, so as recommended by the draft ordinance, it's 600 square feet of lot area per unit.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public in line for comments, Jeremiah?
There's no one else with their hands raised. And we've had the slide up for 60 seconds.
Okay. Thank you, Len.
Sorry, through the chair, Michelle has her hand raised.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Point of interest to do the calculations. So how many units per acre does that equal, the 667 versus 600 versus, say, if we made it 800?
I would have to do some quick math over here. Give me a second.
Because most of the housing authority things that we've, the regional housing needs authority meetings we've had in the past has been based on the density based on the number of units per acre. So that's why I'm asking for the comparison. So I have a better visual of what that means. Thank you. Sorry to make you do math during the meeting, but that's been the standard that we've looked at in the past. I've attended numerous regional housing authority meetings over the last 15 years. So I kind of wanted that for basis for comparison.
Fair enough. So nobody else in line, Gervais, while we're calculating?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we then entertain a motion to close the public hearing? And we'll get an answer for Michelle regardless. Any motion?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Any seconds?
I can second. It's fine.
Voice vote, please.
Commissioner Funka,
Aye.
Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye.
All right, we'll begin our deliberations period. And Kelly, whenever you want to just, butt
I'm
in
happy
there.
to chime in now if
Okay.
that works timing wise.
Yeah.
So the project that we looked at was about 64 dwelling units per acre. And I'm looking at a chart of what the commission has approved. And you've approved anything up to 87 dwelling units per acre, just to give you an idea.
Thank you. Right, deliberations. Any further comments or questions or issues from Commissioner, please? Commissioner Funka.
No, I've thought about it since the last meeting. I'm inclined. I understand the purpose, and I'm in general in favor of it. I'm still agnostic about that trade-off. What to do about the parking, whether to absolve or allow a smaller street front. I'm looking forward to hearing what the other commissioners think about that and what the pros and cons are of each one. But on the whole, thank you for the presentation. I'm in favor.
Thank you. Thank you. Napalo. Were you frozen? No, you're not frozen. Do you have any comments or questions?
My screen froze to get off mute. No, I don't. I don't have any further comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Patel, Sandeep.
So I think we have to answer two questions, right? One, whether we're going to decrease the number of parking, and then two, whether we're going to allow for a smaller storefront. Those are the two questions. Am I
Just
right?
to clarify that there's two parking issues that are distinct. One is changing the requirements for guest parking, actually, and then the other changing the requirements for small lots to allow for bigger storefronts versus small storefronts and keep the parking requirements in place for unit parking. So I just wanted to clarify those two different ones.
Right. So I guess, Commissioner Bunke, I didn't know where you were going with whether you thought it was a good idea to keep the current parking situation, or when you said that I agree with the presentation, I didn't understand.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, that's right. I guess we have a choice to make. So
Yeah.
I agree with what you just said. And I actually liked what Michelle Salmon said, if what she said was correct, which was basically maintain the requirement, allow the smaller storefront, and you can, as long as we have the discretion down the line to allow a variance on that issue. It seems like doing that gives us the most flexibility going forward, gives the commission the most flexibility. So I would put that forward. I think that's a reasonable way to go.
I would agree with that. I would say I would want to maintain the parking standards in that area.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I do too. So let's resolve that one issue first, if we're all in agreement, and then we can move to the other one. Yes?
Yeah, I think, again, reading the room, it seems like we are inclined to recommend to the council that they consider the smaller storefronts while maintaining the requirement for unit allocated parking as it stands. Is that what we're sort of feeling here?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So the other issue would be then whether we recommend to the council any reduction in the off-street guest parking requirement from 1 space per 5 to 1 space per 10. Any comments on that?
I'm also in favor of maintaining the 1 to 10 or somewhere between 5 and 10, with the caveat that there's a project that can't maintain that we would have the ability to grant the variance. Or is that not an objective standard? I don't know.
Do you mean retain the 1 per 5?
Right, sorry, 1 per 5. Wait.
No, it's 1 for 10, correct?
1 for 10, right?
So the existing regulation is 1 space per 5.
Okay, for 5. Okay.
This is a little garbled for me. I'm not sure if anyone else is
Yeah, I
experiencing.
think everyone is picking up a little bit on my end too.
So, and the draft ordinance recommended a reduction to 1 per 10.
Okay. So I'm getting away from any strict procedure here. Are there any other comments or 2 cents worth about going from 1 to 5?
I have a quick question, and maybe staff can help me with this. So if we leave it at 1 per 5, and that makes it so a project is not feasible, then they would have the applicant wouldn't have to ask for variance. Is that how that would work?
I would defer to John here, but I believe the way in which projects reduce parking requirements in Brisbane is through a use permit. Is that right, John? So it wouldn't necessarily be a variance, but there's a use permit to reduce.
Yeah, the point is there is a discretionary vehicle for the commission to grant an exception. So I think, again, all we're really, the risk, and I think we talked about this a little bit, the city standards too aggressive. And I think we can proceed with that. It's what it is now. We're not making it any worse. So if that's the commission's preference, we'll keep it. And there is a tool for someone to ask for a exception through use permit.
Okay. All right. Were there any other decision points that we were?
Oh, just one point of clarification. Obviously, what we pointed out were issues where, the staff didn't have we had some opinion about it, but we really thought we'd leave it to the commission. This whole ordinance has a whole bunch of recommendations. All those are obviously fair game for the commission in terms of what those articulation standards are. And, I don't want to somehow make it seem like those aren't up for discussion by the commission. We weren't asking specifically on those issues, but I just want to make that clear.
That's a good point. I don't want to gloss over anything that anybody else has an issue about. I think my sense of it from reading the staff's and contract folks' draft proposal is that it was submitting to the will of the legislature, if you will, by doing what was required to create objective design standards. And I don't think there's any, personally, as 1 of 5, any strong cause to deviate from what appears to be the trend among other communities and other municipalities in adopting the objective design standards that make sense. I don't consider myself competent to make a lot of changes to design standards that expert folks have worked out as something viable. I think the big issue for Brisbane, as expressed by public comments, is that our multi-family dwelling zoning areas have a real parking issue, and I think that's the one that we're most sensitive to and are I think responding to with the most interest. So that's 1 of 5. Anybody else have any other issues about any other pieces of the draft proposal?
No, I thought that was all sort of the will of the people, right? What the standards wound up being. So,
well, it's the will of the legislature at this point, to some extent. But yeah.
It may be something that's super easy to answer, and I just don't know the answer to is there's one section of this of the red line area where it says that the building height in our the building height can be 28 feet based on approval of a design or design permit or something like that. And is that, and then so how is that objective versus subjective? I'm just wondering.
I'm sorry, I couldn't, everything was cut up. I couldn't quite make the question out. Did you hear it, Kelly?
No, I also am having trouble.
Sorry.
Commissioner Patel, maybe if you turn off your video, you might get better audio.
Sorry, I don't know. I turned, yeah. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. There's one section of the redlined area that talks about 35 feet and 30 feet versus 29 feet. And it's based on a design permit. Is that, how is that? I mean, it just seems like, how is that objective? Because then isn't the granting of the design permit making it subjective?
I think I'm not 100% sure exactly which part of the red line that you're referring to, but we do have a lot of different chapters of the code in here, including some districts and some projects that wouldn't be required to get a housing development permit.
Yeah.
So anything that refers still to a design permit, I'm assuming is a project that's less than 3 units. If that makes any sense. Otherwise, the height should be set forth kind of in stone and the reference should be to a housing development permit.
Okay.
Right, that makes sense. All right. Any other comments or questions or tweaks? So I think the suggested motion would be that we recommend to City Council to it would be our recommendation to adopt the staff and contractor draft proposal with our preference for the requirement for 30-foot lots be maintaining the parking requirement and allowing a reduction in the commercial space on the ground floor, and to retain in place the current one off-street guest parking space per 5 units rather than 10. Anybody want to move that?
Yes. Do you need someone to move? So move, Doug?
Thank you. Any seconds?
I'll second.
A voice vote, please.
Commissioner Funke,
Aye.
Commissioner Gomez,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding,
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison,
Aye.
This does not, the motion carries. This does not carry any appeal because it's a recommendation to the council, correct?
technically it can be appealed. So I'd probably read the appeal.
All right. No problem. Anyone may appeal the action of the Planning Commission to the City Council, except where specified otherwise. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk not later than 15 calendar days following the Planning Commission's decision. Exceptions to the 15-day filing period include the following. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk within 6 calendar days of the Planning Commission's action for use permits and variances, and 10 calendar days for tentative maps and advertising sign applications. An application form and fee is required to make a formal appeal. For additional information, please contact the city clerk at 415-508-2110. All right.
Through the chair, we have a member with their hand raised, member of the public.
Now, we've closed the public hearing. Is it regarding an agenda item?
We'd have to ask to find out.
Okay. We'll hear it, but we need to keep it really short because we technically closed the public hearing. Who is it, please?
Barbara?
Hi. Yeah, it's Barbara. I guess I drifted off because I don't remember there being a public hearing on this. Which is unfortunate because this issue was important to me tonight, and apparently I fell asleep for that portion of a meeting. That doesn't normally happen.
Were you listening when we decided what to move on, or what to move and what to recommend to the council?
Yes, and unfortunately I didn't hear anything about the letter I sent in and if that issue was even discussed.
We did acknowledge letters, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
No. I'm not sure what we can do about it at this point, Barbara, because we've kind of done business with it.
So basically what you're telling me is that you took my letter, you read it, and it was not actually considered.
No, I don't think that that's what we're saying. We're saying that we read the letter, we had a public hearing, you didn't participate in the public hearing, and then we voted on an item, and now it's voted in.
Okay. Nice. Okay, great. Thanks.
Alrighty, are there any study sessions or workshops?
No, there aren't this evening.
Are there any items initiated by staff?
Just a couple. One is a reminder that the mayor's State of the City address is tomorrow evening. So I think if you go online, you can find a way to view it, or I think they actually have a live event. You could register through the Chamber of Commerce, I believe. Find that on the city website if you're interested. And then I think we'll probably try to schedule something for the commission early next year. You probably heard about a series of bills, primarily SB 9, that have some implications on housing. A separate insight when we're talking tonight about our sort of objective design standards. And when we get better information, there's some uncertainty, even from the state, as to what some of the implications of those bills are. Once we have better information, we'll schedule something, get the commission some information just for your knowledge, and we'll see how it goes moving forward. Those are the only things I had.
Thank you. Any items initiated by the commission, excuse me. Commissioner Funka, any items?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Gomez?
No, sir.
Commissioner Patel?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Sayasan?
Well, thanks.
All righty. In that case, I will adjourn the meeting November 16th. Thank you all very much.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Take care, guys.
Thanksgiving.
Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.